Okay, good day, everyone. My name is Okoroafor Christabel. I am a Nigerian social work graduate from the University of Nigeria Nsukka, and I am very happy to be speaking of Ubuntu once again. So we're going to be looking at Ubuntu, the spirit of West Africa, and African diplomacy. Um, Now our outline. We're going to be looking at Ubuntu in West Africa, the African matters and African diplomacy. I think these are very crucial points that we should look into as we are looking into the Ubuntu philosophy. It's important that we also look at what Ubuntu looks like in West Africa. Also, look at the people who brought about African independence as well, while we're talking about freedom and liberation under the Ubuntu philosophy. And alongside the professions and emerging issues that Ubuntu can also take on, we have the African diplomacy. Now, like we have discussed before, Ubuntu in Africa and in West Africa is what I would title the silver lining. So the word "to," from where the noun Ubuntu is derived from, is dominant in a group of language among the Black people of Africa known as the Niger-Congo language group. And the other groups as well who also have different different variations of this word Ubuntu. And you can see that the word Ubuntu is not only Zulu, but it's also part of different parts of West Africa. Like we've discussed earlier, Ubuntu has different variations in different languages, in different African languages, and in different African philosophies. Now, the essence of commonality in Ubuntu is something that cultural borders and linguistic borders could not stop from existing across West Africa. And it has always been deeply rooted in our language, our social structures, proverbs, our struggle, our story, our strength, our village councils, our age grades, and even in the rhythm of the ukwe and the talking drums. The ukwe the is a traditional music instrument in my tribe, and the talking drum is also another Nigerian musical instrument in Yoruba. Now, for the ukwe to sound good, the gong also has to sound good as well. So there's a sense of collective action. For the ukwe to sound good, the gong has to also sound good. The drums also have to sound good. They have to all work in rhythm. If they are not in rhythm, they will sound like noise. For it to sound like one, like music to one's ears, they all have to work together. Now, Ubuntu is not just in one language, it's in different languages. I think the best example to really explain what Ubuntu is about is how we can see that in a language you can have different dialects or different accents. For the English language, there are different accents for it. And then for the Igbo language, there are different dialects. You can go from one community to another with different dialects, but they are all Igbo. That's the same thing with Ubuntu. Looking at it through the West African lens, we can see that it's the same language, but just a different dialect, but it's still speaking on the same thing, commonality. Now we can also see Nigeria. Like we'll be looking at multiple countries. Nigeria will be the first one, but I want to, before I go into Nigeria, I just want to say this, that a lot of the time, when we look at a proverb or a tradition, a practice in our own country or in our own ethnic group, we still hear the sounds or the whispers of collective action, of community, of togetherness. And that's something that you see in the country of Nigeria. Now, in pre-colonial Nigeria, the Hausa and Fulani tribe had a centralized administration with emirs leading multiple administrations under the emir. There were multiple administrators rather under the emir, like the waziri. For the Yoruba tribe, they operated in constitutional monarchy with checks and balances by the Oyomesi, and the Oboni. I had to correct my pronunciation there. And then the Igbo tribe operated a decentralized republican government with councils of elders and kingsmen as leaders or decision makers. And in the Igbo, because they had a centralized government in pre-colonial Igbo tribe, it led to an Igbo saying that says, Iba weneze, ayenwereze. It means the Igbos have no king. So why is it important that we also look at pre-colonial West Africa while trying to look at the philosophical equivalent of Ubuntu? I deemed it important that we look at the past to move forward. Like Sankofa, the Sankofa philosophy had said, we look back to move forward. We're looking at the past, the history of what these West African countries have looked like before colonization, and what systems survived even now. So their philosophical equivalents, like in the Yoruba tribe, we have the Omoluabi, that's the ideal person. You know, the ideal person is ethical, they're respectful, responsible, and accountable to community. Now, in the same Yoruba tribe, we have the Iwa, which embodies aspects of Ubuntu as well. Now, in the Igbo tribe, we have Igwebike, meaning there is strength in community. Igwebike, if you break down these words, you can see that there is strength in community. Now, there's a deep belief in kingship, extended family, and communal survival. Meaning that you're going to see a lot in pre-colonial Igbo tribes, that you see a bunch of small communities living together, a bunch of small communities living together with a council of elders and kingsmen. Now, for the Hausa people, they have a saying that says, a person is a person through other persons. Mind you, this halfway across the world from South Africa, where the term Ubuntu was popularized, but it still has that same sentiment, just in a different font. Now we have Ghana. Ghana is the gateway to Africa and the black star of Africa. Now in pre-colonial Africa and Ghana, the political systems fall into three primary categories. We have the centralized states like the Ashanti Empire, which was highly organized. Now we also have the non-centralized societies, which were more smaller and kingship-based communities, like the Dagomba and Iwe, which relies on consensus-based leadership, meaning that there is a collective decision making. Nobody's making decisions for anybody. Let's say we all come to the village square, we come to the town hall, and we all discuss and decide on what solution or what path to take in terms of challenges that the community would probably be facing. Then we have the theocratic state, which are those led by spiritual rulers who combine religious and political authority. Once again, it's important that we look at what Ghana was before colonialism, what Ghana looked like prior to colonialism, to get a better understanding of what community looks like, get a better understanding of the sense of collective action that these Western countries portrayed. Now, when it comes to the Ubuntu philosophy equivalent in Ghana, we have the Akans of Ghana express Ubuntu as Biakoye, unity is strength. And we can also see proverbs like Buyong De Nowuda. I'm sorry, I'm butchering this, but I think the Ghanaians will help us better to pronounce it. But reflect Ubuntu's philosophy that humans are deeply interconnected in every way, through history, in our sense of being, and in real life. So one person's fortune or misfortune is never theirs alone, but it's tied to the well-being of the community. Now, in the same Ghana, we have the Sankofa philosophy. It means go back and fetch it from the past, which is something that you see in Ubuntu philosophy, that we have and we respect our ancestors, we respect our ancestry, and we have a shared responsibility towards progress. Now we have Senegal, which is the land of Teranga, which is hospitality. Now in pre-colonial Senegal, there were first kingdoms which emerged around the 7th century. So these kingdoms founded other kingdoms as well. And then they finally got to the kingdom of the Jollof, linked to the Ghana Empire. It was the largest territory in the 14th century. It contained various other smaller communities as well. Now, we move on to the 13th century, where the Wolof-related people were under a central monarchy with the Jollof. Now, one thing to understand is that in the pre-colonial Senegal, the king had supreme authority and was supported by provincial rulers, meaning that, okay, there's a president, then there are governors in different states. So provinces had rulers and they managed local territories. Then we had the Council of Nobles and Elders who advise governance. I think it's a very well-rounded and sound government that pre-colonial Senegal had. To have a king, to have rulers in different provinces, and to have a council of nobles and elders who acted as advisors to the government and also advised in who will succeed in being the next king. Now, when it comes to Ubuntu equivalents in this region, we have the Tarenga, which is called the Wolof value, meaning shared hospitality and generosity, and also mutual care. What's it saying? You just have a social obligation to welcome and help others. So I'm not just concerned only about people that are related to me or people in my family. No, I have a social obligation as well to help other people outside myself, outside people that I know. Now, moving on to Cote d'Ivoire, the land of ivory. So the people of Cote d'Ivoire refer to Ubuntu as Maya. Now, in pre-colonial Cote d'Ivoire, we see kingdoms like the Kong Kingdom in 18th century. We have the Bona Kingdom. We have more kingdoms that came up as time went on. And finally, we have the Boile Kingdom. In this time, Cote d'Ivoire was ruled by centralized monarchies, that's kings or queens, and they had a council of nobles, elders, military leaders, and religious leaders. You cannot tell me that pre-colonial West Africa was not comprehensive, was not in-depth. We're talking about government and cultures that existed for hundreds and thousands of years before colonialism. It had to be well-rounded. And as you can see, in Cote d'Ivoire, they had monarchies, they had council of nobles, elders, they had military leaders, and they had religious leaders. They still had this sense of unity in diversity. So they still did not allow absolute power for the centralized monarchies by having council of nobles and elders and still these military leaders. Imagine if there was a king who also had the power of the military for himself, so he could do whatever he likes. So they still divided all those things. And so they were still as well had provinces and towns which were managed by chiefs. And in pre-colonial Cote d'Ivoire, ruling was hereditary, and Akan state succession was matrilineal. So we have this different outlooks in succession in Cote d'Ivoire. Number one, it had to be hereditary, and then for the Akan state, the succession was also matrilineal. Forgive my this symbol. It was also matrilineal. Now, Burkina Faso, which is the land of the upright people, pre-colonial Burkina Faso is mixed. It was never truly centralized, and it was also never truly decentralized. So centralized kingdoms were in the center and the east, and then the decentralized kingdoms were in the west and the south. So we had the Mozi kingdoms, which was the most prominent form of centralized political organization in Burkina Faso, in pre-colonial Burkina Faso rather. Now, even in the Mozi Empire, there were hierarchies to ensure that there was no like centralization of power. There was no absolute power. And then we also had other powerful kingdoms as well. And then on the western and southern regions, they featured decentralized systems with village confederations, strongmen, and merchant or warrior networks. There was a mix. Now, in Burkina Faso, the Ubuntu equivalent of this can be seen in Mozi Kingdom. Nam is a concept of sacred order and social responsibility. In pre-colonial Burkina Faso, you can also see communal farming practices and extended family obligations, which foster interdependence. We can also look at Liberia. We can also look at Liberia and Sierra Leone, the land of the free and the Lion Mountain, respectively. Now, pre-colonial Liberia consisted of the Vai, which lived in the northwestern Liberia and parts of Sierra Leone, and the Kru, which lived in southwestern coastal Liberia. Now, the Vai had centralized chiefdom, which was led by paramount chiefs, and also a council of elders who advised these chiefs. The Kru, however, had a decentralized system. So just like Burkina Faso, it was mixed. So the Kru had a centralized system with each village having council of elders, and powers of the village chiefs were never absolute. It was never centralized. Now in pre-colonial Sierra Leone, we have the Mande and the Temne people who had their own political institutions. So the Mende operated a system of chiefdoms where paramount chiefs had authority over smaller chiefs. And the Temne had decentralized political systems with village headmen playing key roles in decision making. So for Liberia and Sierra Leone, it was a mix of centralized and decentralized communities. And looking at these few countries from West Africa, we can still see that sense of collective action, we can see that sense of communality that Ubuntu upholds as well. Now, in the same vein, talking about Ubuntu in Africa and also Ubuntu in West Africa, I think it's also important that we talk and also look at the African martyrs and heroes. That's the ones whose heartbeats for a new Africa. We have Patrice Lumumba, we have Nnamdi Azikiwe, we have Thomas Sankara. Now, Patrice Lumumba, although not from Western Africa, he is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I still have to say that Patrice Lumumba's story is something that really tears a hole in my heart. And as we are still talking about African matters and heroes, to dive more into his story as well. So this is a man who is a leader with a gold tooth. He's someone that fought for the independence of the Congolese people, ensuring that the Congolese wealth is for the Congolese, not for the Western body. He fought for that. And his story is one that is very inspiring. And we also have Nnamdi Azikiwe, who is also known as the Zik of Africa. Also the founder of the West African Pilots, and also the Sultan of the Rising Sun. Now, by the Rising Sun, is basically the Igbo tribe. They mostly characterize themselves as the Rising Sun, the land of the Rising Sun. Now we have the Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso. He's the founding father of the land of the upright people. Now, more on the ones whose heart beats for a new Africa. Patrice Lumumba, who spoke on African unity and dignity and the liberation of the Congolese people, spoke on a Pan-African truth. Congo's world belongs only to its people. And for that vision, he was assassinated. But in his letters, we can still hear Ubuntu. And he said, I know that history will have its say, but it shall not be history as written in Brussels or Paris, but the history of a new Africa. Thomas Sankara, who was the people's president, and advocated for collective prosperity and a reimagined diplomacy. He said, while, while revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. Look at how we are talking about them now. Talking about Thomas Sankara, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Patrice Lumumba. Their stories are literally inscribed into the history of Africa. Their stories are ones that have been written in blood. He said, while revolutionaries as individuals can be murdered, you cannot kill ideas. His governance was Ubuntu in motion and in action. He was assassinated for disrupting colonial logic. Now, we look at Nnamdi Azikiwe, who founded the West African Pilots in the height of colonialism and the height of assassination of people who were trying to push and move for the independence of a new Nigeria. He could have been killed. He could have been assassinated. But regardless of the dangers that his life would be under, he still decided to spread information on anti-colonialism, which in its right is still Ubuntu, is based on Ubuntu. It's based on Ubuntu's value of liberation. So Ubuntu lived in every word that he spoke, from his novel or his book on My Odyssey, even in his diplomatic ventures in bridging the NCNC and the MPC, and also bridging Anglophone and Francophone Africa. Now, I want us to just take a moment of silence for the African heroes and the African martyrs. A few seconds of silence for people whose hearts had beat for a new Africa, people who fought for a new Africa. A moment of silence for the ones whose stories bring tears to my eyes and fire to my lungs. To the ones who make me a little less afraid of dying for a cause that may never bloom in my lifetime. To the martyrs and the heroes of African diplomacy, whose Ubuntu was too radical, too bold, too human for the empires to tolerate. These leaders and many others embodied Ubuntu as political diplomacy, where they dreamed of an Africa which belonged to us. They were Ubuntu with a passport, Ubuntu in suits or traditional attires and berets, Ubuntu in foreign rooms refusing to bow. So when we speak of Ubuntu in Africa and West Africa, we must speak not just of how we live, but also about who died trying to make our lives better. Not deals in paper, but visions written in blood. It's paramount that even when we talk about the future of Africa or the future of West Africa, we also need to look back, like Sankofa said, at the past, the ones that have built a foundation of African independence, built a foundation of a new Africa, the ones who gave their blood, who gave their life work for Africa and a new Africa, the ones whose lifetime did not even, a new Africa could not even live in their lifetime. They did not see a new Africa in their lifetime. It's important that we also give them that honor. Like we say, Ubuntu is also about honor, respecting our ancestors. And in the same light, we need to also respect these African heroes, these African martyrs. Moving on, we're going to talk about African diplomacy. Now, around the world, diplomacy can be seen through the lens of economic diplomacy, human rights diplomacy, peace and security diplomacy, and environmental diplomacy. One thing we need to know is that African diplomacy is not an exception. Although the word African diplomacy is newer than other Western diplomacies due to independence, it has always existed throughout our history, from the treaties to tributes to the trade amongst empires, communities, and kingdoms. After independence, African diplomacy had the opportunity to move from a fight for national liberation and freedom to a more continental unity stance. Now, the goal and aim of African diplomacy in the age of East versus Western power struggles is to ensure that there is continental unity and progress. That is through the knowledge of geopolitics. One, through the knowledge of geopolitics, we can ensure that we extend the reach of our own organizations, where we are able to prioritize continental trade and the strength of this local currency by reducing dollar dependence. And I want to say this, that the, excuse me, I'll say this, that this is the time where we are trying to prioritize ourselves. We're no longer looking outside Africa at what is happening in the world today. We are more concerned about what is happening in Africa. So we're trying to reach and extend the reach of the African continental free trade area. I think we already heard about it in the Western, in West Africa, where we have a free trade area, where like ECOWAS, for example, established a free trade area where countries in ECOWAS do not need a passport. They don't need an ECOWAS passport to move from one continent country to another within West Africa, or the ones under ECOWAS. So what I want us to do is to really extend African continental free trade area wider than just the West Africa, but into other parts of Africa as well, where we ensure that there is export and import within the African continent, so we can improve our and progress in industrialization and technology. We're not just depending on Western influence for moves or progress in Africa. We should also try to pursue strategic autonomy through diversified partnership. So this is a situation where most times, or in most African countries, they pick a side in global power wars. No, it's not doing that. It's not our problem. Well, it's not like it's not our problem. There's still a sense of collectivity as humans. But I still want us to look inward, look at Africa, and instead of picking a side, we diversify our partnership based on alliances and based on opportunities. So one, Africa stops picking a side in Western versus Eastern politics. Two, we filter our alliances, we filter our decisions, especially external ones, through the lens of Ubuntu. Does it benefit the whole? And is it the will of the people? Also, we should also get serious about climate justice and resource conservation. I don't mean full climate justice, no. Fake climate, where we really get serious about sustainability, get serious about preserving and conserving our natural resources. So that way we are also preserving Africa's autonomy, or our ability to be autonomous, our ability to be free from Western influence, or to be free from external influence. And it also preserves our future and our security as well. So with that being said, I really want us to look at Ubuntu as a philosophy that is in-depth, as a philosophy that is comprehensive, and as a philosophy that is global, as a philosophy that is as well continental, not just popularized in one part of Africa, but also something that has sentiment, that has seed that has been planted in our tradition and in our culture across history and across time. With that being said, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope, and I just say a big thank you to my senior colleagues for this opportunity. I couldn't have done it without them. Thank you and God bless.